All right, this is Wednesday, November 17th at 7 p.m. This is the regular business meeting and public hearing for District 96. Kathy, can you call the roll?
Ms. Bond? Here. Mr. Marvel?
Here.
Mr. Muirhead?
Here.
Ms. Murphy? Here. And Mr. Hunt?
Here.
Quorum is present.
All right. First item on our agenda is the public hearing on the 2021 property tax levy. So at this time, is there a motion that the Board of Education open the public hearing on the 2020 property tax levy?
So moved.
Second.
Kathy, can you call the roll?
Okay, Ms. Murphy?
Hi. Or, hi, yes, here?
I think, yeah.
Mr. Marvel?
Here.
Mr. Muirhead?
Aye.
Ms. Bond? Aye.
Sorry about that, Joel.
Mr. Hunt?
Aye.
Okay, hearing is open.
All right, hearing is open. Are there any presentations or anyone to speak? All right. If not, is there a motion that the Board of Education adjourn the public hearing for the 2020 property tax levy?
So moved.
Second.
Kathy, can you call the roll?
Okay, Mr. Marvel?
Aye.
Mr. Muirhead?
Aye.
Ms. Gunn? Aye. Ms. Murphy?
Aye.
And Mr. Hunt?
Aye.
Hearing is closed.
Okay, then that brings us to public comment. And I have someone here in person, Jim Colombo.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Mr.
Microphone's
Colombo?
actually the right size, that's the first for me. For those of you, sorry, I started the joke. My name is Jim Colombo, I'm one of the music teachers at Hauser Junior High School. And I just wanted to take a second as we start to get into all of our December chaos and fun to thank Martha, the administration, and everyone at the school board for allowing us to do what we get to do in the midst of crazy times and constant changes with things, allowing us to trust the research that's been done and all the science and everything, and allow us to safely and successfully teach the kids band, orchestra, and choir on a daily basis. So I just wanted to take a second, come in here and say thank you for supporting us, thank you for letting us do what we do, and we appreciate it immensely. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for doing what you do.
Yes, I think, Linda, you said it definitely. Thanks to Mr. Colombo for the work he does in our school. All right. So next, at this time, are there any proposed changes to the agenda? And if not, that takes us to the superintendent's report.
All right, thanks, Dan. I'm going to start with November is Board Appreciation Month. So I want to start and echo some of Jim Colombo's words, but appreciating all of you. So at your table, you have some notes from Hauser students. I believe maybe each Cougar Connections group probably wrote notes, so you all have some different notes, and there are notes hanging up here on the wall. In your bag, and I understand I also get one, that there's something made by all the elementary students, and I believe we're supposed to open it. And Emerson Duty is here. Emerson is one of our art teachers and was instrumental in getting this project off the ground. So I have not seen it either, so I'm very intrigued, but you should take a minute now and open it and feel appreciated. Gentle.
All right. Okay. So are these wind chimes? That's wonderful. Thank you so much.
So I had heard that the effort was to demonstrate also that the alignment of our school, so all 4 elementary schools, I believe in the past, you've gotten maybe 4 different tokens of appreciation from 4 different elementary schools. So here are all of our elementary schools together. Emerson, it's beautiful. Thank you, and Ellie, and thank you for the concept, and thanks for including me. Appreciation to this board.
Thank you, board.
These are beautiful.
Yes, thank you so much.
And I I will take a minute as you're admiring the wind chimes, and thank you again to the teachers. I just want to share the appreciation that I know comes from probably first and foremost our students, our families, our teachers, our administration, from me, governance and leadership as our elected officials in this community. Governing the work that we do in public education is no small task, and during a global pandemic, particularly challenging. So thank you for all you've done as we've kind of forged ahead with educating our children in person as much as possible, in person, all day, every day. This year, as you know, our many COVID protocols, and in the midst of it, still improving our facilities and working through a new strategic plan. And just, we have a lot going on, and I just want to thank you all for your leadership and governance in making it all happen. So happy November Board Appreciation Month.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much to all the students and the teachers who helped put this together. This is great.
Just moving on to sort of what seems like sort of our normal business of the day is just an update for all of you on our saliva screening. We've been just sharing our ongoing participation information. I also just wanted to share that we were notified by SHIELD. So SHIELD is the University of Illinois entity that supports the program, and then they essentially subcontract with different agencies to do the actual saliva collection in the schools. We're going to have a change in our healthcare partner starting in early December. They've promised us a seamless transition. We're going to move from an organization known as Visit Healthcare to one called Pivot, who will be coming in and really doing the same work. Our principals were saying they just kind of gotten to the point that they hardly knew they were in the building, so hopefully that will continue and that a seamless transition really will happen. The other thing that they've just started, and I just kind of want to plant a seed, is the idea that fully vaccinated individuals really do not need to, perhaps should, I don't want to say shouldn't, but it would be more an issue of kind of resources around shouldn't. It's not that they would get abnormal results necessarily, because we've certainly had some of our Hauser fully vaccinated students doing saliva testing, but I think after the first of the year, when kids are back from holiday break, we'll give that a little bit of time, and then we'll kind of reevaluate where our numbers are. And because we're doing that opt-out process, if we really sort of come to learn that fully vaccinated children do not need to test, then I would probably do an updated communication, seek, sort of an updated consent or updated opt-out process. But just something to think about. We're not ready to make that transition yet, but an idea that's been already suggested is something we may move toward. And those are my only items on the superintendent's report.
All right.
I'm sorry. Is it kind of like, like loan servicers being changed recently? Is it the same, like other schools are going through a change in the service provider for the SHIELD testing?
Yes, I'm not entirely sure why. I don't know if it just became more of a workload than the Visit Healthcare wanted to take on, or SHIELD was making changes. I know the group we're getting is also doing work in Berwyn, which is one of our geographic neighbors, and I've heard really good things about this group. So I think it is like the group that employs the people that come in is changing. So hopefully it does not appear that different to the children or to the staff, to our schedules, et cetera. So I think SHIELD has many different entities. I mean, to make this all happen in, I don't know, of the 840 some odd school districts in Illinois, they promised it free to everybody. I don't know what sort of their actual participation numbers are, but it's high, right? I mean, many districts said, yes, we'd like to be part of it. So I think they've just had to do some kind of internal shifting around and just to make things as organized as possible.
And then after the winter break, you mentioned like seeing perhaps how many of the 5 to 11-year-old population is vaccinated. How are we able to collect that or get a sense for those numbers? I know perhaps different communications are going out from principals asking to potentially self-report that. Is there any other measures?
Yeah, so it's a great question, Stephanie. The Department of Public Health has a system called iCare, and it's actually a system of that records immunizations, and it is accessible by school nurses. So without parents having to send in a card or report it to us directly, our nurses actually have access to that system and can kind of see as vaccinations are being recorded. Now, the system's only as good as, physicians' offices and the Walgreens and the CVS's and us and all the entities making sure those reports are in. But I will tell you, as they were reviewing it when the students 12 and up were being vaccinated, that it was pretty accurate. So there were maybe a few missing records, but our nurses are already starting to monitor that with the 5 to 11-year-old vaccines coming through.
So how are you thinking about and maybe you're not there yet, but the updated opt-out, like would that somehow, could we just say, I mean, would we be able to just leave it alone and then we would know through that eye care thing, like who doesn't need to be tested, or do we need to do another, kind of piggybacking on that question,
Yeah.
like, do we need to do something for self-reporting, or like, it seems like that might be a little messy in the beginning.
Well, and the other
figuring
thing
out.
I'm trying to figure out is, would parents prefer to keep having their children's saliva tested even though they might be vaccinated?
Mhm.
And let's say if our numbers, let's say our vaccination rate's like a 50-50. You know, one thing now, because we have such a high level of participation, most children in most all classrooms participate. So this idea, I know you had all asked me early in the year about any sort of sense of stigma, or if you weren't one that was doing saliva, it's all very, just kind of works right now. I don't think kids feel sort of left out, or, you know, I don't think there's a stigma there with that, at least from the way I understand it. So this starts to shift everything a bit, and I do need a little more time just to think it through. They just mentioned it this week. They said, and by the way, we do not recommend right now that fully vaccinated individuals have saliva testing done. So I knew that was true with adults, and of course there have been such a small group of children with only the 12 and up for us. So I do need time to think about it. I do wonder if we have a large number of children vaccinated, which is what we hope, and we really ought to stop, then maybe we almost like, what do I say, sort of put a deadline on the opt-outs and then go for an opt-in. Or, you know, I mean, we may just have to sort of shift our process overall just to make sure that we're doing it correctly. I don't want to, you know, our goal all along has been to test as many children as possible, but also to make sure that nobody feels sort of duped or tricked or sort of inadvertently participating if they don't want to be participating. So I do need to think about it. I do need to sort of, I think, press shield a bit to say, like, are you sure that children shouldn't be testing? Because, like, I know people are already worried, like, post-holidays and people are going to travel, and, you know, just it feels like a layer of safety that, as a school district, I don't think we're quite ready to give up, even as we start to look at more vaccination numbers coming in.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to ask, is what is the, you know, and I'm sure it's a broad rationale across the board of why why they don't recommend it, but I would love to get more information on why are they not recommending it, and is, you know, just to make sure we all feel comfortable with that.
Right, and I think I am, you know, is that they believe that a vaccinated individual is so unlikely to have COVID that it's not a good use of resources. But I think we don't know enough yet about, you know, we're hearing about breakthrough infections with adults, infections for the young, vaccines for young children is so new. You know, I think we might say, can we just keep doing this for a little while longer? You know, I mean, I do believe it adds a layer of safety for us. We've picked up a number of cases, you know, pre-symptomatic, asymptomatic cases through saliva screening. So yeah, we're not, so for parents that are listening and for all of you, we're not really ready to just sort of flip that switch yet.
Yeah, I would love to know, like, are resources scarce and that's why they're saying we should move that way, or, you know, just a little more information on that, just so we can, you know, we are moving into the winter and travel, and it just feels like the wrong time, like possibly not the most comfortable time to stop that. But again, I don't have that information, so.
And I did have a very charming 5th grade student tell me at the vaccine clinic that she hoped this meant she could stop saliva screening. Because it was very unpleasant in her opinion. So,
I can totally imagine.
I told her I would take it under advisement, so here we are. So anyway, yeah, I mean, great questions, and questions that we're still sort of sorting it out, figuring it out. I think we have to understand how many children are fully vaccinated post-holidays, what we know about travel, what we know about COVID numbers, and then where we are with our process overall of saliva testing.
I was gonna make this comment in the board member comment stuff, but that's a little ways down, so it feels a little disjointed to save it. I participated in the first event for the vaccination clinic, so just 2 things. I was just curious how the second one went. I think the first one seemed largely successful. I heard it got a little crowded, and not every child just walked up and took their shot and walked away, so it got a little, as expected, especially with the younger ones. Mine was one of those, or at least one of mine was one of those. Just curious how the second one went, and also for those that participated, is there going to be an email in the next week or so? Because I think it said automatically there was going to be a second one, but does
Yeah.
that, I don't remember who we used for it, but do
Yeah.
they have a timeline on when they think they're going to be back out, like communication for that?
Yeah, so we have the dates for the second vaccine clinic, and
Okay.
families should have it on their vaccination card, but Kathy and I will make sure that a reminder goes out to families on that. And so we had, and actually I want to thank Kathy Perino and Don McLaughlin and Nancy Schuneman from our district office, Linda Roberto from our district office. They all sort of put together the logistics and the organization from the district side. All of our school nurses participated. They were not the ones hired to give the immunizations, but they were here. And first I said, I'd really love you to come to be a friendly face and somebody to, you know, sort of hold some hands of some children, et cetera. And I think it's been really valuable to have them here. There are children that just walked right up and got a vaccine, and there's other children that said, I am definitely not going to do this right now. So our nurses were great. I mean, it was sounds strange to say this, it was a pleasure to see them in action and really supporting children. To Kathy, Donna, Linda, and Nancy, just the organizational details, deli numbers, et cetera, et cetera. So the first clinic was much more crowded. I think maybe because it was Ames school and mostly Ames students. A lot of families, they just stayed after school and sat out right in that area. We took us a while to kind of thin things out. The second one had a very different feel. It was much less crowded. We'd asked families not to come unless they were within 10 minutes of their appointment time. We also had, what was the number, Kathy, like 118?
I think it was around there.
We had, so of the 200 slots that got filled, only about 118 showed up. And so the cancellations weren't entirely clear to us why. You know, I think maybe some families got an appointment somewhere else. Maybe some families decided to wait. It wasn't clear to us because the registration process was handled by Positive Health Systems. Interesting, I was talking to another superintendent who did a vaccine clinic in their district and worked with Jewel Osco, and also had kind of just a drop off of almost that same percentage. So either just families found other opportunities or changed their mind for now or something. But again, we did not have 200 children coming through in that time period. We had, like we said, about 118. But same thing, the nurses did a great job. Families were great. I would say, in general, overall, families were very appreciative of the opportunity to have kind of a familiar setting. Maybe Ames lunchroom is not familiar to every single child in the district, but you could tell, as Kathy was saying earlier, kids knew each other. You know, that it felt very kind of friendly, and who would have thought? And somewhere they have a story to tell, right, about getting their vaccines at their school and the saliva testing they do and everything else. The time of going to school in COVID is certainly something I think our children will remember. Maybe our really young ones won't. So maybe that's a good thing.
Given the change, though, I think the second one was supposed to be at Blythe and then was changed to Ames. I don't know.
Right.
There were signs at Blythe, or were there any reports of folks getting confused?
There
on
were
that?
signs, and we sent out, I think, 3 different reminders. We don't think that's why. And again, just hearing it from other districts, that there was maybe some drop off in participation. Is right here in this room, so vaccines were given right here. We use those little screens that are sitting out in the hall. They just really liked it because there was a waiting area here, and then when families were done, they could exit immediately to the outside. So they really liked the flow of it, and after doing it here at Ames the first time, they asked if they could continue at Ames for the second. So that's where the second dose clinics will be, and it's November 30th and December 6th. Yeah, so we will send reminders to families so that they get that they come to the right follow-up clinic. So, and we'll all be here again.
I did notice on that for the second one, it did specifically say, please don't show up within 10 minutes, because I know I was here early because my kids go here, so I just stayed, and I didn't even think about that. That probably was why it got so crowded, especially if you had a near 3 o'clock appointment.
Yeah,
or
I bet if
something.
we were 3:15, 3:30, 3:45, you'd probably stayed.
But then when I heard him say, like, oh, we're not doing appointment times, just take a number, I was like, ooh. Okay, I kind of heard just it kind of gradually got backed up, so those with later appointments ended up sticking around a little longer. So I guess that seemed like a good idea to ask. We'll see if parents that are already here actually adhere to it or not. But I didn't really hear complaints. I just heard that it just got a little
it was
backed up.
very full in there. People were masked, and but the social distancing was it was starting to get a little tight. I think we had people down the hall, asked some people to be outside, so it was we were able to spread people out, but it was sort of at the first moment surprising.
Yeah. Thanks.
Well, definitely, as you mentioned, echoing some of your thoughts, I think it was great. My son went. It was great having familiar faces, as you mentioned, from the nurse from Blythe over here helping out, and she helped out quite a great deal. And also, thumbs up, great incentive. I think my son was very impressed with getting 3 suckers at the end. So we definitely need to keep that in
Yeah.
place,
Yeah,
if not up
yeah.
it for the next one.
Yeah.
They were very generous with the
Yeah,
candy
that was all the
treats at
positive
the
health
Yes.
systems. They served the candy, and I'm like, if there's a time maybe you get candy, it might just be now. So yeah, absolutely. So yeah, thanks for those questions. It was, it felt like a valuable event. It felt like an event that people appreciated, and hopefully it allowed us to sort of encourage more vaccination.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, it was good to see the attendance rate and how fast, you had mentioned how fast it had went initially when they first
Yeah.
came up. And I know a number of other people that have gotten appointments at Walgreens and CVS and stuff. So it does seem like a lot of people are taking advantage of the opportunity that now presents itself. So that's good to see.
I'm sure that's why participation rates went down a little bit, is people, it was the first option to get an appointment, and then all of a sudden something else opened up earlier, which means they
could
can
be.
be vaccinated sooner.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm sure that kind of,
Everybody remembers the scarcity of
Right.
earlier this year, but doesn't seem to have built back up that way.
yeah.
Right.
All right. Any other questions for Martha? All right. Well, then we will move on to the consent agenda. Can the board secretary read tonight's consent agenda?
Tonight's consent agenda consists of meeting minutes from the October 6, 2021 Committee of the Whole meeting and the regular business meeting minutes from October 20th, 2021, as well as the closed sessions from that meeting, October 20th, 2021. The personnel report as presented, the payables pre-list as of October 31st, 2021, and the payables pre-list as of November 17th, 2021, and that is it.
All right. Is there a motion that the board approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second.
All right. Kathy, can you call the roll?
Mr. Barsadi?
Abstain.
Mr. Mearhead?
Aye.
Ms. Gunn? Aye. Ms. Murphy?
Aye.
Mr. Markle?
Aye.
Mr. Hunt?
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right. Next on the agenda is the Riverside Education Council. I don't see anyone from them here tonight. So that brings us to board member comments.
No further comments.
Yeah. I guess we've talked the vaccine.
I
Go
really
ahead.
appreciate the appreciation. This is a
Yeah.
first for me, certainly. And I know nationwide, it's a really interesting, unique time for board members. So I just feel very grateful to be able to serve on this particular board for this community. And this really means a lot. It resonates, in particular right now with things that are happening among other such appointed public officials in same positions.
Does anybody listen to the podcast, The Daily?
Yeah.
The last 2 morning episodes were about school board issues, so it was
Oh.
interesting, but
Yeah.
I definitely echo Stephanie's comments.
Yes, definitely. It is great. It is a great Board Appreciation Day. Is one of my favorite meetings.
Yes.
So yes, that is very nice. I definitely appreciate the students' time and attention on this, as well as the teachers who helped pull this all together. Teachers and administrators. It's definitely very much appreciated. All right. So then that brings us to committee reports. First one listed is the Education Committee.
Yeah, I just wanted to remind everybody, last time we had a presentation from Angela about student achievement. We had the first kind of glimpse of what our academic testing numbers look like. So if anybody's interested in that, they should go watch that presentation. It was really good, and just keep in context. Test scores aren't everything. There's holistically, we're looking at the whole child and social, emotional, and everything else. But it was a really first glimpse into how COVID has affected us in that way. So I would recommend people listening to that. And also, this at the last meeting or 2 meetings ago, we talked about with the kindergarten action team action committee. Not exactly sure if there's an exact name for that.
Full day kindergarten action team. I
Okay,
think.
thank you. We had mentioned doing a community survey, so I know this week the board saw a survey for that, and I just wanted to open up the floor to make sure if there are any questions or comments, we can, talk to Angela and Martha about that. But so if there are, just.
Well, I guess for one, I did met with Angela and Martha yesterday in regards to the questions. I don't know if we're talking about changing or putting additions on that. There was one, given the feedback the board has received in the past and what we've seen on social media in regards to just this past year at the start of the school year when one of the half-day, the fill-in, I guess, provider after half-day kindergarten stopped offering that service, there definitely was an expression of a need in regards to childcare that was, I believe, could potentially feed into one aspect of this. And I was wondering if, just for the sake of transparency, if a question along those lines could be included in that survey.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And so Dan and I did talk about this with Angela yesterday and thought, if the board had additional feedback, our purpose in the survey is to kind of gather broad sort of perspectives, feedback about the value of full day kindergarten, the value of half day kindergarten also, kind of mixed thoughts about whether or not you want to ask daycare related questions. Again, the survey's not out yet. We're thinking of sort of after Thanksgiving, right? Angela's our time frame. It's certainly very editable, but I think we know our goal in thinking about full day kindergarten, the information we want to bring back to the board, as Angela shared, is kind of the educational committee. The committee is made up of all educators, of course. They're going to talk about the educational value. Next COW meeting, we anticipate, and I know David and Jim and I are going to meet early next week. I'm talking about the finance and facilities aspects that would be needed for full day kindergarten. And then there is this whole layer of community feedback, right? And we know that community feedback comes to us in such a way that we hear probably from families with young children who have yet to come to full day kindergarten or maybe just missed the opportunity to be in full day kindergarten. So there's, the likelihood that it's somewhat of a skewed result. We're going to work hard to get as much community feedback because we believe it's important to all taxpayers to help us understand the additional costs that the district would take on to provide a full day kindergarten if we decide to go that way. So certainly I think this is an opportunity for the board to say, this would really help me in deciding, this would be important to me. So, Dan, I think what you're sharing is understanding daycare, families' daycare needs, is certainly feels important to you. And again,
Or
just
not necessarily, it's not daycare, because obviously it's full day kindergarten, but childcare needs and the importance, how much of that is a driving factor towards this request as well?
For me, I kind of want to take a more global approach, like just to kind of get the temperature of the community. I like that we added, the first round of the survey had just questions really about full day kindergarten. This one incorporates people's feelings on half day kindergarten. So for me, especially if I'm taking the survey, I don't have children of that age. I feel like that question is very specific to a very specific group of people. And for me, I'm just looking for like the global temperature of the community, because I think once we figure that out, once we know the temperature, once we know what educators want, once we know all these pieces, then we're going to make a decision. And if we have to then think about helping people with childcare or working in our community, then I feel like that would come next for me. So I don't support adding a daycare question or a childcare question, but I get what you're talking about completely, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah, no, I would agree with Linda. I mean, we're just focusing on kindergarten right now, and while I know childcare might be something that parents might consider, they want full-day kindergarten because of childcare, I think that's sort of, I'd say right now out of the scope of this. We're just focusing on like the education. What's the educational benefit of going to full day? It's not so much childcare as what's the educational benefit.
But a little also to Dan's point, like I guess I could go either way at this point in the survey, but people might be in support of full day kindergarten because of childcare needs. We are looking at it through a different lens of academic, educational, but even the 40-page journal that was printed said, you know, this is one of the factors. This is one of the factors that school districts are looking at and do need to consider. And so is it going to eliminate people who don't have a strong opinion one way or another on the academic or the social emotional growth piece, but they're like, I just need it out of necessity and convenience, and I think it's something we need in our lives. So are you eliminating, at the same token, somebody who feels very strongly just gonna put yes to probably one of the other questions that asks about the academic value of it too. So, but I could see it adding some value, but at the same token, perhaps coming in later. I would just want to capture people who, for them, the reason for full day kindergarten is not within the scope of the questions as they are asked, which fall into more of an academic, social, emotional aspect. But yeah, the only question I had about the survey, though, not related to what you were saying, Dan, is I know we had talked about like QR codes in various locations, et cetera. Maybe a dumb question. How do you prevent like duplicates? I know there was like nowhere in the survey that asked you to identify yourself or anything like that. So if you're just like, could somebody
Could you
just
stamp
submit
the survey?
multiple?
Yeah. Don, I don't know if Don or
I don't know,
Angela would answer
somebody
it. Like,
who's more
would
tech
people,
savvy.
this idea that would people take the survey multiple times, or how do we, I know we talked about like only, accept one result from one IP address, but I don't know that SurveyMonkey allows us to do that.
I was just thinking because of the QR codes and
Yeah.
things.
Possibly we have to register each time. Usually when surveys, it's not really IP based, it puts a cookie within the browser,
Right.
there's a way around that. If somebody wants to get around it, they can, unless you force them to authenticate some way, which could be oftentimes be done like via Google account, Facebook account, Twitter account, so forth. But even then, if you have all of those accounts, you could still take it.
Yeah. And again, this isn't like we're voting, like the community's voting yes or no on this. Like, this is just one piece of the puzzle. This is what, and if somebody really is going through that effort to,
I think that was, I think that's an excellent point also, that we don't want this to feel like it's a vote, right? And that with the community, percentage of community respondents, yes or no, that's the determining factor. It's a factor in helping everybody understand, the flavor, temperature, perception of the community of this holding value for children or not. I shouldn't say or not, but or half day being sufficient.
And as we go through this process too, the community has other ways to, contact us through email, through public comment. So this isn't like the only way people can access.
Definitely, and I guess I want to emphasize again, I don't want to take away from the educational aspect of this at all, and I definitely appreciate how that's in there and how that's worded. Again, I guess coming from my perception, again, going back to the start of the year and the public comment that we got coming into the board, it felt kind of disingenuous to me with it not there. It almost seemed like that was something we were avoiding. I don't think it was intentionally avoiding, but it just seemed like this really is part of this question. This is part of this equation, and it should be represented there. Again, we have this opportunity. I hear what you're saying, that we can collect this information once as we move further down the path. Maybe we have a survey that's a little bit more targeted for people who are directly affected, of which I possibly could be a member of that group. All that said, I would guess that when we send out this survey, the vast majority of responses we're going to get back are from people who are directly affected or recently have gone through a time of being directly affected to this. So it seems to me, again, if it was a missing aspect. That was when I read the survey, it really flagged, and I felt very strongly about it, which again was why I met Martha and Angela about that.
So to your point about this being only one piece of the puzzle, so when the committee reviews these results, what is the interpretation? Like, what are they getting out of it?
My sense, Wesley, is it's more important for the board to have an opportunity to review the results, because the educational team is really, I think they feel very charged with, and appropriately so, to address the sort of that educational benefit, that academic and social emotional learning benefit. I think the cost the impact on our facilities, the feedback from the community, I think is more what the board, the board plus the administration certainly blends together to lead toward decision-making. So I know last week or 2 weeks ago at the COW meeting, I believe you asked the committee, I believe you did ask the committee to come up with an educational opinion, right? So because I think real honestly, the committee has been sort of, are we supposed to make a recommendation? And we're sort of thinking we're not necessarily coming forward with a recommendation, we're coming forward with information, sort of an analysis of educational benefit, educational value, an analysis of what it's going to cost, and can our facilities accommodate it? And then that survey is sort of our best chance at giving us community feedback. Now, Linda, you're saying like, yes, people give public comment or people email the board directly. There's other ways we do get feedback from the community, but I think the feedback from the community, my sense was it was something that the board wanted to evaluate. I think the committee would be hard pressed to evaluate the committee feedback because it's a group of, and Angela, maybe step up to the microphone, you can kind of help me out here, but the committee is essentially kindergarten teachers, first grade teachers, special education, EL, administrators, specials area teachers, like really looking at how does full day kindergarten differ from half day kindergarten for the experience that children have.
Yeah.
And I think that's key, obviously, in the decision making, but I think for all of you to understand that it's an added cost, right? It's an added cost that ultimately taxpayers bear. So again, I think Wesley's question, what do you think the committee will do with the survey results?
If anything, and if nothing,
If
that's
anything,
fine.
yeah.
I'm just curious if
Yeah.
this is something that you guys are going to take into consideration, or if it is purely just for us. Because I have a comment for you, but I'm just curious about that.
Okay.
To Martha's point, it is more for the board than it is for the committee. The committee's looking at the educational benefits and impacts of full-day kindergarten versus half-day kindergarten based off the research that we're doing. Obviously, as educators, we have feelings and thoughts on what would be best for kids and how time, if given more time, how that would be utilized. Educators are always, regardless of a grade level, looking for more time. It's a valuable resource. So this committee has ideas on how that time could be used to benefit our students. The community piece is more for the board because as educators, we are not really dealing with the community thoughts and opinions on full-day kindergarten. As the educators, we're dealing with the educational aspects.
Right.
So when thinking about a presentation about the research we've done, about the cost analysis, we would look at the community survey being a part of the presentation for your information, but the other pieces of that for your information would also be those educational benefits and the indirect and direct costs of the programming too.
Okay. So where I was going with that is just a lot of these are feelings questions, and a lot of them are feelings about data, and I'll just throw it out there. I'm going to listen to the data over people's feelings. So if this is just for us, I think it'd be good just to understand like what the community perceives this to be, and I think that's what you just answered for my question. So if this is really for us, then I think I hadn't thought about it until you just brought it up, Dan, but because that is such a big portion of it, and even beyond people that I've spoken to or have reached out to me, not through like board comments and stuff, that is the main, it's that gap between all-day daycare to half-day kindergarten to full-day first grade, and it's that kindergarten transition year that's the biggest pain for people, I think, from a childcare perspective. So I would not be opposed to adding something to your point, because if that's what the community's feedback is, that'd be a good nugget for us to have. But I also get the education part, which I think you're going on, but like whether or not kindergarten programs lead to greater academic success, ... like I don't know that I care what the community thinks. If the data shows that is true, then that is true. I think this would help us inform, do we spend money on that or not? So I do think both of those are, for a board's perspective, that might be helpful just to understand how many people are doing it for
Like what type of
childcare
question?
purposes.
Yeah, I know. Actually, to Wesley's point, I just sort of, I was a little hesitant I sort of agree with you. I was looking at that and I was hesitant to say anything because those are feeling questions. I do have hesitancy sending out a survey that's asking sort of factual-based questions to people who may not have the facts. And so, to Wesley's point, if somebody comes back and says that they want this because they think it's going to increase, or they don't want it because it's going to not affect the educational benefits, I'm going to take the word of the committee over the community. I mean, so I guess to maybe even let's make this possibly the survey even a little bit more simpler, is like, do we want full day kindergarten, yes or no? I mean, make it like a very basic, to the point. Why do you think, and then basically, why do you want full day kindergarten? And maybe make it a multiple choice, not a multiple choice, but select a few options. It'll help with daycare. We feel it will improve the community, I mean, educational benefits, et cetera.
Are we at that point yet, though? I guess I think that.
If we're just trying to gauge the community, I guess that's what because for me, that's what I want to know from the
If you're not
community.
going to put as much like emphasis or value in the reasons behind why they want it or don't want it, or if it might eliminate people who want it because of the full day childcare, like then you're not fully capturing at the end of the day their bottom line assessment. So maybe approaching it that way. At the very least, whatever their reasons might be,
Right.
you get a clear answer. We want it, whether it's because they're very attuned to the research and believe that it does have the academic benefits, social, emotional, daycare, any other reason that might not be captured fully by any questions that we come up with in their mind, would at least get to the bottom line of like yes or no. So.
Right.
I guess Martha had mentioned she was trying to steer away, at least on this initial survey, from something that was seemed like a vote of a yes or no.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I was going to say, I hear your intention, but I think that's a trap that we would lead ourselves into.
Well,
as a
again, I
board.
guess we're in the same problem of people who want it or going to want it a great deal and are going to say absolutely yes, and other members of the community,
Right.
have less incentive to.
And I guess
vote one way or the other.
and I'm sorry to cut you off, Dan, but I
No,
guess
it's okay.
the for me is, by the mere fact that we're sending out a survey, aren't we already sort of gauging whether or not people want it? I think just by the mere fact that we're doing that is sort of implicitly asking, do you want full day kindergarten or not? And so let's just be direct and just ask that question outright. It doesn't mean we're going to do it. It doesn't mean we're not going to do it. We just want to know, what does the community feel and why?
And I think that's why I'd rather stay away from the yes, no.
Yes,
question.
I'm so opposed to it.
I think you
could do it like.
should not be a popularity contest.
Yeah.
And to Dan's point, and you as well, Leslie, I think understanding the motivations of how people think about why kindergarten is valuable is really, in my mind, what this, or not valuable, and that's an option too, is really what I would want to know. Because we're not going to be making our decision here, at least I won't be, on just one element. So the survey is part of it, but honestly, Angela, your committee
For sure.
will have more justification on my thought processes. Like, what is the value of the education that's being provided? And why is that a good thing to spend resources and our time here on? It's still, I think the survey should be a little bit more loose in terms of gauging thoughts rather than yes and no answers. I think there's a danger of getting trapped by a question.
But you could easily fit it into this format, rather than saying yes, no, is full day kindergarten would fill a need in childcare services or something like that. Strongly agree, disagree, and I think that feels less of a vote, but to me that'd be the exact same thing. Like, I think anybody that wants full day kindergarten is going to go strongly agree down the board. They're not going to pay attention to it one way or the other. So I think if this is just for us, this will be a good assessment to see how does the community believe these things to be true or not. The data will actually tell us whether they are true or not. But the child care thing is like the one thing that's missing. I don't know, I feel like it's kind of like the elephant in the room and saying, why is the district just trying to avoid that question? I don't know. I don't feel strongly whether it's in here or not, but I think you bring up a good point I hadn't really thought about otherwise until you mentioned it.
But I guess the question is, and this is just a reminder, the way data is especially in today's day and age, the way data is just being thrown around. I mean, social media is taking the place of like factual data.
Yeah.
And we have to rely on the data. And so with the educational community, if the community came back and said, like, everyone said, yes, we want full day kindergarten, and the education committee says, you know, there's really no benefit to it, we shouldn't be doing it, I'm going with the educational committee, okay? So I guess for me, I don't want to say I don't care why the community wants it. I'd like to know why they would like it, but to sort of ask all those questions, I think we're just we're dancing around what we're trying to get at. And that's just I'd like to just be more direct.
It's important to note, though, and we've said data a few times, that any results we get back from this, by its nature, SurveyMonkey does not provide data. This will be, it's non-scientific. It is anecdotal, and the incentive is all on, the person who responds. You're not capturing the however many people have chose not to respond for one reason or another.
I think we need to go back, for me, the way I'm thinking about going back up a step. What is the intention of the survey? For me, it's to gauge community interest or community, like where the community is at. Whether you ask point blank, do you want it or not, or do you support this because of that, it's kind of getting to the same thing, so it's going to give us the same information. I'm uncomfortable saying, do you want it, yes or no, as if it's their decision, because it's like, clearly we want to do it, like what's best for our community and for our students, but it's not like I don't want people to feel like, no, it was 87% said yes, and like, I don't want to put us in that situation where we are feeling that we are directly going against, or, I mean, I don't know.
Well, but let me ask this question, though. What if 87% came back and just by looking at the questions said they support it for whatever reason? I mean, it's essentially the same thing.
Yes, but I don't want it to become something that becomes an advocacy element. It should be a gauge of where the community's at, like Linda says, but again, not a vote. And so the more people think it's a vote, the more likely we are to get frustrated emails that say, why didn't you listen to what everybody said?
I mean,
when they said you should do this.
In a perfect world, both of them will be pointing in the same direction.
Right, yeah.
Right.
And it'll be I think we're kind of getting in the weeds here a little bit about this, so I just feel like we should, as a board, be above, like, I don't know if we should be drafting the questions or talking, like, I think what do we want to know? We want to know, gauge the interest of the community. I mean, I personally don't I shouldn't say that, but necessarily the reason why people want it doesn't really matter to me, whether it's for childcare reasons, whether it's like we are an outlier in the norm of kindergarten in the area, or if it's because it's just educationally good for a lot of students. I mean, there are many reasons you can want this program that are, very rational. So
Yeah,
I don't want to
agree.
focus on that. I want to focus on, do people want it or not, and how do they feel about it, but not as in a voting poll.
Well, I think to that point, it could give us insight into maybe half-day kindergarten is still really appropriate, but there's something else we should be doing. And maybe it means additional work with community providers, but it does give us insight as to what we should be, what the community thinks we should be worrying about.
I think the reason I initially asked the question is because these are all questions based on like things that have been scientifically studied, and you're just asking people's opinion that probably have not read most of that data. So that's why, like, if we're just trying to assess whether or not people want full-day kindergarten, then I'm not sure, and this is only for our purposes, which is why I wanted to clarify that I'm not sure most of these questions, I mean, do they get us anywhere? Because the first two, I think it's just like a full-day kindergarten is appropriate, a half-day kindergarten is appropriate, but then it goes into like, data-oriented type questions that I'm just reading this going, I'm on this board and I don't even know whether these things are, true or not, because I haven't read in that level of detail all these studies. So that's what I was just trying to figure out. What are we trying to get from this information compared to the questions that are actually in here? And it seemed like there might have been some opposition to putting something about childcare in here, but I almost feel like that would be a more relevant question to get at, like, does the community want this than some of these others?
Well, where are we getting to here?
I mean, possibly, it sounds like maybe this could go back to the education committee. I mean,
I guess, but to
I mean, we
Wesley's
have-
point, though, the survey's for us, it's not for the education.
no, I meant the board education, Sherry, myself,
Oh, I see.
Angela, and Martha, to, you know, I feel like right now we're getting a little bit micro level, that kind of committee work, so we can take this information and possibly
Yeah.
discuss it there. I mean, that might throw off our timeline a little bit. I don't know how much that, you know, matters.
No, Linda, I think that is appropriate. That it could be better, well discussed, perhaps getting in the weeds on the committee level. And I don't want to be rushing a decision when it needs to be thoughtful.
When did you want the survey to go out?
We were looking at a timeline of after Thanksgiving break through up to winter break.
Up to when, okay.
So it's not, and I think we're looking at scheduling, we're looking at scheduling our next meeting. We postponed the previous one, so we're looking at rescheduling it before the December 1st COW meeting. So we would still be about on schedule. It wouldn't really push it off.
We're having an December 1 committee, the whole, we could do some, you know, planning, previewing, discussing, and really come back to all of you for sort of general direction and guidance. But it wouldn't throw our timeline off that much.
No.
You know, I don't know that we would be revising the survey so much as sort of just trying to clarify purpose based on all the input from tonight.
And I think, I'm not trying to blow the whole thing up and like make it start over. I think it started with Dan had a question about adding one more question, and to me, if we just add that one more question, like I'd be fine with that. I think it would be interesting to see how the community interprets these things compared to what they actually, like what data actually shows, just to see kind of where everybody is. So I don't think there's anything wrong with collecting the information. It just sounded like a few people were kind of opposed to going with the child care question, and I guess it just doesn't feel that off.
I mean, I'm not opposed to a childcare question per se. I just don't want it to be like, I don't know, it doesn't feel global. That, like, I mean, I'm a taxpayer, this matters to me. I care about how this school is spending money, you know, like it doesn't apply to everybody. And it seems like we're trying to find out, like, do you only want it for childcare? Because that might, you know, I don't know, that feels a little
I don't
uncomfortable
know
to
that
me.
anyone, given these options, I don't know that anyone would say just childcare and none of this other educational benefit means anything to me. I would think it gives opportunity for people to answer affirmative in several different areas. I hear what you're saying, that you're most likely, it depends on how that question is worded. But yes, it could be kind of micro-targeted. If the question's written specifically that talks about your personal child care needs, then that's only going to affect a certain few members of the audience or potential audience. But perhaps a question could be written in such a way that makes that a little looser, or conforms back to the group, or is more of an observational, you know, that there is a need for this because of this situation, perhaps.
And I think you'd be able to cut it because the IM would tell you parents of a child, this percentage want it, and then parents that don't have a child, you know, so it shouldn't skew the data too much by saying, oh, only, you know, this many people in total.
Well, why don't we?
I don't know that I guess all I'm saying is, like, I feel like now you're feeling like I'm like disrupting the whole thing and like send it back to committee and
I'm not feeling that way at all, no.
Okay, all right.
I mean, I definitely feel like once we go back to committee and talk about this again, I don't think we should be having these conversations over and over again. Like, I think we're having the conversation, and then we can bring it to committee and make a decision. I mean, what you guys are saying is absolutely valid, and I think there's probably ways we can add a question that's getting towards that. So, you know, I think Sherry's not here as well right now, so I would like to hear her opinion.
Yeah.
Sure.
But I think what we can do is have the conversation, see if we want to add a question, bring it back before, you know, hopefully before the committee of the whole, and then just, you know, I just want to make sure we're not getting bogged down in the weeds of this at the board table.
And I think just to kind of maybe summarize that we'll take it back, we'll bring it back for the December 1st COW, which is soon, and it won't throw off our timeline. But I think, again, the committee was responding to the sort of board feedback around, we want to know that broad feedback from the community, but avoid this idea that we're asking the community to vote on this. Because, you know, Wesley, you point out like the nuances of understanding the research behind full day kindergarten. There's also a lot of nuances in our finance and facilities. Like I would tell you in some ways that's the more
Yeah.
challenging part for the board to really discern too. So there's so much to this decision making, but you know, the goal of the administration and the committee is to make sure that you have all the information you need to make, you know, what will eventually be a vote, right?
Yeah.
And are well informed. So if this would help inform the board to a greater degree, then that's certainly something we want to do.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I mean. If this is for us to give the, you know, we should, if this is something certain board members are definitely very, you know, feel strongly that is a piece of information that's going to help make a decision, I'm, you know,
Thanks.
Yeah.
That's helpful.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Linda.
yeah, that's all I have. If that wasn't enough.
Yes, and as a side note, a school board getting bogged down in the weeds, that never happens.
Yeah. Well, we're not supposed to. We're trying to.
Not supposed to, absolutely, absolutely, strive not to. All right, so next then is the policy committee.
Yeah, I guess just a quick update, hot off the press, the most recent press update 108 update memo. So I just got this tonight, so I have not had a chance to look through it. And I think the approval deadline is March 30th, I believe. So we were looking perhaps just some light winter recess, winter holiday reading for everybody. No, but we'll probably bring it to like the February cow or regular business meeting in February.
Yeah, that's the thing is like maybe February cow to review it and saying it's new for me also. So Stephanie and I will both take a look at all of this along with Kathy too. And just, you know, I know sometimes when we've had a big packet, we've kind of cut it into pieces, but
Yeah, I think
if
it's
a lot
pretty
of them are pretty simple
standard.
reviews, maybe we can, you know, do a discussion in February cow and then a vote in February board. That's what
Yeah,
we'll
I
aim
think
for.
pretty standard, perhaps a new policy. I'll have to confirm what some of the tabbing means, and then, you know, the 5-year review, the updates, but perhaps a new policy, much like last time, that we might look to adopt or not. Not sure if it's an optional one or how it works, but more to come on that. That's it, really.
Well, luckily, the holidays are coming up, so we'll have some time on our hands to
Yes.
get through that. All right, thanks, Stephanie. All right, next is facilities.
Thanks, Dan. The committee met about a week and a half ago. Most of the items that we discussed are going to be in our old business and new business categories here today. The one thing, we did have a brief discussion that Jim and Martha have always done a very good job in bidding out and making sure that we are getting good prices on things like painting or chimney removal. Sometimes we see those prices and eyes get big, but what Jim shared is that mostly that represents a very reasonable price as compared to some other vendors. So, but the other items are further on in our agenda.
All right, thanks, Joel. Then next is Personnel Committee.
Not much new. The only, I guess, one advancement from comments of the last cow around Martha's review process. Dan and I are going to get together with Martha and kind of talk through some more details and try to get ahead of the year-end review process. Just Martha had shared some tools that we were looking at, and she and I discussed that, and they seem a little out of whack on the pricing compared to other things that are used for much broader assessments. Just the cost relativities were way out of balance, so I don't know that we're going to go forward with that. But trying to use some of those theoretical concepts that were put together by that program to see if maybe we could build something in our own, either somehow within board book or within some other, I don't know, something, just like a better way to capture big ticket items that happen throughout the year to make it easier to review, and then just maybe finally find a consistent process for all of us, just to say, okay, this is how we're going to do this going forward, and How do we discuss it? How do we write it up? And just trying to stay ahead of it so that we're not continuing to do this in March and April of every year. We can just be ready to go and launch it in maybe February, March to start getting those initial thoughts and kind of have it done and not feel rushed. So still more to come on that, but Dan and I are going to talk that through and then bring some stuff to you guys and get some feedback.
Yes. All right, thanks, Wes. All right, and last but not least is Finance Committee.
Nothing too much to report. I know we've got the tax levy so coming up in school fees, but nothing new.
Speak up, David. I can barely hear you.
Oh, sorry. And nothing, really not much new to report. I know we have a few things on the under old business, but nothing else this time.
All right. All right, thanks, David. Well, all right, so that takes us off of committee reports and brings us to old business. And the first item, when you know it, is the tax levy. So we go here. Is there a motion that the Board of Education approve the tax year 2021 tax levy resolution for a levy amount total of $27,329,819, a certificate of compliance with the Truth in Taxation Act, and a resolution authorizing reduction of certain fund levies for the 2021 levy year as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Let's see, is there any discussion on this? Or Jim, was there anything to present on this? Is Jim with us tonight? Oh, there he is, yeah.
This is more of a comment, Jim, than appreciate the diligence that you go through in presenting the numbers here. And generally, I've seen this now for 5 years, and I understand it better every time. But I will be voting in favor of this, and that a primary reason is that our tax levy is based on CPI, i.e. inflation, and we know that our costs go up every year fairly consistently, and this resolution to stick to a CPI increase is reasonable. No one likes to pay taxes, but this is just plain economics, and there's aspects that are out of our control. But this is a reasonable request. It's a 1.77 to capture some potential extra development in the community, but CPI for this year is 1.4%.
So Jim, something I might want to ask about, or maybe I know you've explained it to us before, but if we could go over it again for the benefit of folks that might be tuning in. And something that I've had folks ask me about, when they will see this here with the tax rate going up of 1.77, and they'll look and say, yeah, but my property taxes have gone up way more than that. What's going on with that? Why would that be?
So every year as a school district, we're asking for the same amount from the previous year plus a little bit for inflation. So our pie is growing slightly. And then whoever's contributing to that changes based on how the houses are valued and how the property taxes switch. So an individual's portion of the pie might grow or shrink. And also in your property taxes, there's a lot of other taxing bodies involved too, the high school and the village.
To add to Jim's point, and this is a good one, we know that a number of the villages in our district are looking for levies that are in the area of 3%. Don't quote me on that because that's mostly out of what I've read. But also, we just went through a triennial reassessment, which every 3 years you do see increases in your assessed valuation often. And really, what an assessment is a method to distribute a total cost through the community. And so there's aspects of our tax, the district's taxes are pretty specific to a very limited geographic area, but the county taxes and the water reclamation district and a few other things apply across the entire region. And so that also plays into the portion that an individual taxpayer has to pay. So there's reasons it gets out of whack, and they're not necessarily something that we drive. We are asking for an increase in our budget of 1.77%, and that's, we will get something slightly less than that if we approve this. We are not getting an extra 10% because an individual's taxes went up by 10%.
Another question I had, Jim, is you explain a little bit more about, so there are a couple different things we've added on there in addition to, see how it was worded again. The last attachment we had, a resolution authorizing reduction of certain fund levies. And, I think I saw that recent changes in law had lifted caps off the educational fund, and so if you could explain that a little bit for us or for
Sure, so when we levy, we're kind of budgeting, but it's money that won't come for a while. So a couple of our funds, like if you remember, we transferred some money from transportation, but there's some where you can't transfer it out, like IMRF Social Security. And the way to get that to the right balance is to ask for less than you need in a year. So we'll keep bringing it down. We don't need 7 years in the liability one. So I under levied in that, and I kind of set all of the ones I don't want those to change. When you put in the levy, the county's going to adjust it. You always ask for a little more, but there's a couple numbers we don't know yet. So you ask for a little more, and then they'll cut it back down when the real numbers come in. So that other resolution is telling them where to take it from. Some districts might say take it evenly from all of them, but for my planning, it's easier to just ask for as much in education as possible and then tell them to take it from there. That's the biggest one.
All right, that makes sense. Yeah, if we can contribute in future years, not having to shuffle money around from one fund for another, that the less we do of that, the better, at least in my opinion.
Right, we're getting there.
All right. Any further discussion or questions?
Just good to know, Joel, it's taken 5 years, and I feel a lot better because I spent a lot of time going through this, trying to understand to make an informed decision tonight. So good to know there's a couple years ahead of me before I feel real confident with it. Yeah, thank you, of course, for putting it all together in the way you did. It was very beneficial, particularly for me.
I have to do that every year to remind myself how it all works. So.
And the documentation is always fantastic.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I'm going to add one thing, and that is there's also an issue with how the county distributes across different classifications, specifically industrial, residential, and commercial properties. And this year what we've heard is that commercial properties are paying a little bit less, or sorry, being assessed less than is typical, which means residential ends up picking up that proportion. So that's also something that's not in the district's control, it's more on the county level. But I'm trying to emphasize the fact that and why I've been pushing this is we're asking for a fair amount, but there are aspects of how the property taxes get distributed that are not under our control in any way, shape, or form.
Or for that matter, how property taxes are assessed. I mean, if you compare properties in Cook County, even just Riverside, just look at Riverside, the discrepancy between homes, similar homes, is just substantial in some cases, and it makes absolutely no sense. And so, I mean, I've had similar questions, but you got to go to the county. I mean, for that. So, like like Joel said, what we're asking for is reasonable, very reasonable, so.
All right, are we ready to vote?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, Kathy, can you call the roll?
Mr. Muirhead?
Aye.
Ms. Gunn?
Aye.
Ms. Murphy?
Aye.
Mr. Marvel?
Aye.
Mr. Barsadi?
Aye.
Mr. Knight?
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right, next item on the agenda are the approval of school fees. Is there a motion that the Board of Education approve the school fees for 2022-2023 as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Just quickly wanted to follow up on the last conversation, the last meeting. I fully support these. I have no problem with them. I just want to make sure as we move forward, I know we're increasing by CPI, but I also, need to look at the real dollars, and some of those higher grades, the real dollars feel significant, a more significant increase. I understand how they're increased, but, for certain grades only increasing $5 over a few years and other ones 15, 20, it just, in real dollars, let's also look at, make sure we're keeping that in check moving forward. That was all I was trying to say last time, and I don't think I ever really explained myself very well, so I just.
Linda, I've been thinking about it a lot, and I think you're right that I agree with you that we should be looking at this every year. And I think that's what we're doing
Yeah.
here, and so we continue to make sure that things are reasonable.
Yeah, no, yeah.
Um,
And we have a great formula for how to do this. I just think we need to make sure, like, in real dollars, it feels, like, I
Feels
understand it's
right.
going up by CPI, but, everybody doesn't always, like, live and breathe by CPI. They just think, wow, that went up $15, that feels a lot, or something, so just
Mhm.
also look at it in the terms of real dollars and how that, making sure we're staying within, norms. But I support this. I just wanted to clarify my confusing conversation last time.
You kind of kicked it around, but nobody really, I don't think there's like a strong push to freeze. I mean, now that we've had 2 weeks to think about it, does anybody feel differently about freezing it for a year? 'Cause, I mean, these numbers aren't going to change. It'll be a small amount we don't get. We can always, I think we already do, I'm pretty sure we do look at this every year, don't we?
Yeah.
At least I
Yes.
recall, yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we could always take these increases next year, just put a single pause on it. I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other. I also feel like this is reasonable, but I don't know if you've received any feedback outside from that last meeting on these from anybody else or not that would sway us to take a different position this year.
Having thought about it, but I'm still where I was at last time, and also simply because we do have provisions in our policy to, if someone needs it and needs a reduction, then it can be pursued. So I think we have ways to protect people. And that's why I'm sticking with, or holding to leaving it how we've got it proposed right now.
I guess along those lines, in that specific policy you're talking about, Joel, and I don't remember how long ago it was, but I do remember we had a discussion at one point that these fees had kind of sat in place for a long time and in some ways seemed arbitrarily out of whack. Some things were much more expensive than others of similar size or perceived value, and I think there was an attempt to, last time we talked about this, to get things back into an alignment, and also to provide that CPI as a year-to-year increase as a way to make sure that things aren't artificially held downward, and as a new fee came on, then it might be artificially high in comparison. So I think it's important for us to stick with that work that was done when we passed that policy resolution. I'm not sure how long ago that was. Was it 2 or 3 years ago, perhaps?
Yeah, 2019.
2019, okay.
2018, it's 18-19 school year, I think. And that's, we realized in policy that the board really should review this annually, so just another refined process we've kind of taken on.
I guess the way that the motion is written, if somebody was in favor of a freeze, they would just vote no to the.
Yeah.
Either that, or we could make changes to the motion, perhaps. Or, yeah, if the majority of the board was in favor of doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I've been trying to think through both, particularly both motions together, like the tax levy and this, utilizing, kind of that process of like the economics, the reasonable standards CPI, why I could attribute that to the tax levy, but not so much to the fees, But I don't know, I might just be the minority here, but from the last meeting and in just thinking about it over the last 2 weeks, I would have been comfortable, or am comfortable with potentially raising it for the year, but I don't know if that feels contradictory to the vote we just had on tax levy, because the same argument could be made for both, right? The reasonable CPI economic perspective. And I agree, Joel, I asked a lot of questions last time about what were the ways in which somebody outside of needing to qualify for free and reduced lunch or waivers, are there just other measures by which community members could request that? And I know that there might be, but it's perhaps creating like another barrier, people needing to ask, not knowing that they need to ask, that they can ask, so those are just all the things I would kind of have been percolating in my head. As a result, also the public comment that came through got me thinking about it, so I appreciated hearing that perspective.
If I interpreted what you just said correctly, like we are applying the same theory with CPI.
Yeah.
It's just rather than just taking it across the board every year, Jim just has a rounding system. So if it doesn't hit the threshold, it looks like it freezes, but it's not. And then it's that. I'm going to explain this wrong, please. It's like if it goes from 60 to 61 and a half, we just keep it at 60 until it gets to 63 and a half, and then we round up. But then it stays at 65, and that way it's just dollar amounts rather than like looking for 50 cents increase every year or something. So it is applying the same process, just in a different way, I guess.
Right.
So I'm not sure if that's, I
and
heard what you were saying.
Yes, I understood I was applying the same process. So under that line of thinking, I thought that I should want to vote yes to both of them if I'm applying the same type of logic to it. And yet I feel differently about this one on the same, even though I can apply the same logic to it. So I'm just trying to kind of navigate some of that. But, I mean, it sounds like people are more open to just passing it. It's reasonable. It's, thinking through like the yearly, I don't know, Dave. I know you weren't at the.
No, but I watched the meeting. I guess I see where you're coming from, and I can see how that there's a struggle there with that. But I guess the way I look at like the tax levy, I mean, if we wanted to apply the same logic, I mean, our fees across the board don't increase like 1.77% every year, and so we have to sort of, I mean, some increase significantly more. I mean, look at the contract we just approved for teachers. I mean, it was higher than the salaries were higher than 1.77. So I just sort of look at Jim does a great job at like balancing the budget and putting the documentation together to support this, and so I'm comfortable with this based on the information that we have. And so, but I mean, I do understand where you're coming from, but I sort of look at it as I don't look at it the same way.
I'm good. I just wanted to make sure we were all, we kind of talked about it, but there wasn't really closure. So I just want to make sure nobody changed their mind or felt strongly about that before we vote.
Definitely appreciate you bringing that up. All right, is there any further discussion? Are we ready to vote?
Yep.
Okay, Kathy, can you call the roll?
Ms. Gunn?
I'll go nay.
Ms. Murphy? Aye. Mr. Marvel?
Aye.
Mr. Barsadi?
Aye.
Mr. Muirhead?
Aye.
Mr. Huff?
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right, next is the facility assessment. First one listed is the roofing inspectors, no action required. Joel, was there something to be said on this?
Not really, other than this fits what we described, I think I described last meeting, which is we're going to look at our buildings, infrastructure in, I'll call them themes, and this is one theme, which is roofing. And what was added to this is also a proposal to look at the district headquarters building as well. Ramesh has looked at these companies and he has good things to say about the Illinois Roof Consulting Association. And these are the non-action item is just its reasonable cost for what we'll be getting. And then the second item, I guess I shouldn't go.
Yeah, we'll
You're in control of the agenda, I'm sorry, Jim.
no worries, no worries. We'll, tell you what, we'll move to that second item here, and I will ask, is there a motion that the Board of Education authorize the architect to provide professional services for the project as presented?
So moved.
Second.
All right, so is there discussion on the proposal, the MOU?
Actually, Steve from DLA is here, but I don't know that you needed to say all that much about this. Did you?
If there's questions.
Then I'll just lead here. This is a visual inspection of the exterior of our buildings. Each building will be looked at in detail, and then there will be recommendations for repairs or other fixes. This is part of our 2022 summer, it will become part of our summer 2022 capital improvements, just maintaining our facilities in a state of good repair.
So I feel like this might be a dumb question, but don't we do this on a regular basis? Like the visual inspections and stuff? Like I guess I wasn't sure what was here that might be different kind of compared to what we were talking about of like more extensive.
Our maintenance people do look, but a lot of times they'll get a report that something seems off. And so then that'll give them more of a reason to look at it. But this is a detailed look at the entire structure at the same time, trying to see perhaps potential problems ahead of time, looking for evidence of distress that might not be immediately obvious, I should say, when one walks past the building.
I mean, is this not something that we do, or like we pay, not even our own maintenance people, but just anybody, DLA or anybody like kind of doing just a general observation to make sure nothing's changed with, winter and freezing and water and all that stuff getting in, or just, I don't know.
This
I guess I'm
is
surprised
more
that.
defined, I should say. I
Okay.
guess the better way to describe it is
Okay.
more defined and trying to develop a capital improvement plan on the basis of what is found.
So would you say this is more extensive than what we would normally need to do on an annual basis? Or like, should we be doing this annually? I mean, it feels like something maybe we should be doing more regularly, but maybe not.
It's a fine line,
Okay.
I guess.
I don't know what the normal standards are for like that type of stuff, how often you do certain inspections like you would with mechanical systems or something, but that's fine. I was just curious. It looked like, I just felt like maybe this might be something that we should be doing on a more regular basis than every 5 years or something like
Well,
that.
and it may be something that it is something that we should be doing on a regular basis. And I think that's how we ended up here.
I got you,
Is that
okay.
we know that we had the condition report from 10 years ago, and then that was, I forget all the architects' different names, but there were 3 different firms, including DLA at the end, who did a condition survey. Some of their reports were based on older information, so this gets us back to, it kind of resets that process.
Okay.
So does this MOU relate directly to that presentation we had from DLA and the other firm? I can't remember.
It relates directly in the sense that the interviews we did, presentations, should call it, were for more comprehensive, entire campus services, whereas this is specifically to the building envelopes. So the exterior of every building below the roof line. So it gets back to my idea of themes. We have a roof theme, we have a building envelope theme. In a while, we will have a mechanical equipment theme. And so we will just do those in their given subject matters.
All right. Any further questions? Are we ready to vote? All right, Kathy, can you call the roll?
Ms. Murphy? Aye. Mr. Marmal?
Aye.
Mr. Barsadi?
Aye.
Mr. Meredith?
Aye.
Ms. Gunn?
Aye.
Mr. Hunt?
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right. Next item we have our facility updates. We have a monthly progress report.
Jim, you look like you're ready to say something, but I can intro.
Sure. We're 100% done on the central script.
Hey.
It'll be about $86,000 under budget.
Sure, nice.
And next week, we expect to be done with the Hollywood. And we don't have all the accounting yet, but that should be right on budget, just late.
So the overall summary is that central sprinkler is complete and it did come in under budget, meaning we did not spend all of our contingency. We still have the outstanding issue of some water pressure that we're working through for, and we'll get to that a little bit in a little while, with the village, and Hollywood is looking pretty good.
Great.
All right.
And so we should have like the occupancy in the multi-purpose room by next week?
I believe so. I'm not quite as familiar with when that permit gets approved from the village.
I was just wondering, Steve, because you're here, do you know the exact time? I know we were hoping for November 15th, and I know it's November 17th. We're really, really close. On Hollywood, do you know about occupancy finalization and all that?
Yeah, the way things look today, we are preparing to get together with the ROE's office to get inspection. So we can occupy, I believe, the week after next week. That's the intent.
I will just share that it looks great. I was over there, I think it was Monday or Tuesday of this week, and what day was it, David? I saw David out running. So, yeah, they were just finishing up the floor. I mean, it looks just like the rendering. So the lighting looks great. It's just a nice feature. I think it looks really nice from the exterior. The playground looks great. So.
Yeah, that's one interior picture looks awesome. I love
It
these
does,
things.
the one with the
Yes.
lights.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Those
you're
lights
right,
are really
it
good.
looks exactly like the rendering.
It
too.
does,
I
it
double
really
checked
does.
That was actually a photo, it's not,
Yeah.
not a cartoon.
The multi-purpose room lights in Hollywood.
circles and
Oh, in the
UFOs coming
renderings that
down.
we saw years ago, like they were so neat looking, and it literally looks exactly like the
Yeah.
picture. So it's just so
Yeah.
you know, like that's what it's supposed to do.
I
but-
must admit, when I saw those renderings a couple of years ago, I
yeah,
thought,
yeah,
oh,
yeah,
no,
yeah,
come on,
yes.
no, it'll never look like that.
No, I know. You're like, we're not gonna be able to find
Oh,
that.
yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Sent me.
No, I drove by and it looks really good. I'm excited to be able to go and see
Yeah.
it. Looks really-
All right. So then that brings us to new business. The first item under new business is an MOU for Blank Park Multipurpose Room Auditorium repurposing.
This may be why Steve is here. This is a MOU, obviously, for Blythe Park. We will be doing some initial sessions with the administration and the building occupants to look at the benefits of a potential repurposing of the auditorium, meaning rehabilitation of that room, looking at space needs and how best potentially that auditorium could be divided up to fit the purposes we want it for things such as art or a multi-purpose room. This memorandum of understanding has kind of a circuit breaker in it, in that we would do the visioning and programming. We would get a report back from DLA on what they think and what their investigations determine. And then we would choose whether or not to continue moving forward with that concept of repurposing the auditorium. It also includes some services for replacing the parking lot, which we talked about in the past, and it still needs to be done. And then there's also an evaluation of the Blythe Park mechanicals, the boilers specifically, the HVAC system, because that should be done, that evaluation needs to be done if, and any potential fixes determined now if we're truly going to embark on auditorium work. We should do it all at the same time.
You've mentioned previously working with, was it the Historical Commission or whatever, did that happen already, or is that after the MOU, or? I'm just curious.
That did happen.
It did happen. Are there any major issues that we need to be aware of? I'm just curious how that went.
The short version is that the historic commissions generally, and all historic commissions, are really only interested in what the exterior of the building looks like. If you don't change the exterior, or you don't change it in a way that the commission finds detrimental to the property, then things are easy.
Okay.
So interior work is not subject to their purview. Now,
So that should make us being able to do kind of what we want to do a little easier than what we maybe initially thought or might have been concerned about? Is that...
What it means is that we probably don't want to do an addition on the outside.
Okay.
We will end up involving the commission if the need for, say, openings in the building to get additional light down to that lower level are required.
Okay.
And then the commission would have a say, and they would most likely, putting words in their mouth admittedly, make suggestions on the best way to be consistent with the current structure.
Now, I will say a couple of years ago when we talked about a similar proposal, we did get feedback from the community, from some folks who either had attended Blythe Park growing up or were just from the community and really proud of the school, proud of its historical designation, and who definitely expressed some reservations along those lines of making changes like this. So, not saying that's good nor bad, but that is something that had occurred previously, when I think maybe a couple of years ago when we talked about a similar idea.
And that's why I noted that this MOU is parceled out in terms of different tasks so that we can potentially address community feedback, or if what we think is worth doing in the building, what is truly worth spending our resources on.
Okay. Then moving on to the next item is the MOU for Central/Hauser Playground and Site Work.
Now, at some point, I am going to make Steve come up.
Came all the way out here,
This
right?
is another step in the process of play and parking, and potentially highly likely, a playground in that parking lot. The goal would also be to identify any needed infrastructure fixes at the same time. Sorry, not identify, because we know what some of them are, based on some work that was done by the civil engineer a month or two ago. But to make sure that we incorporate any necessary infrastructure fixes into the proposed plan. And as I noted earlier, there's also some question about whether or not we need to upgrade the water service to the building. And that would be incorporated as well.
For the sprinklers?
Correct. To basically to match what code says you need to do. Now, the building does have an occupancy permit from the fire department, and they're satisfied that the work is good. But there's some questions on how to interpret code that they're adding considerations for. But then this essentially would address or look at that whole, what do we do with the current grassy area at the back edge of the lot, and what kind of all-weather surface would be appropriate there. And that's something that DLA will be investigating. As you know, that could be grass, it could be artificial turf, it could be something else.
So you're
I'm not
referring
sure I
back
have
to-
that much else to provide more detail because we're so early in this, but
Okay.
looking at making that back area usable throughout the year.
So is that an actual baseball field? I'm picturing it in my mind. It seems like I can see batting cages and
It
things
is a
with so,
baseball
yeah.
field. There is a backstop there.
It's like T-ball field.
For- yeah.
T-ball field, okay.
Baseball field, but yeah.
Are there any full-size baseball fields?
9
in
months
the
out of the year,
village?
it's more of a swamp, but
Yeah, there's a
I'm
fence.
asking
where
you
Yeah.
can
No,
play
there are
baseball.
You are correct. There are no full-size baseball fields in the village.
And you'll note that in the project schedule, there is a board discussion item, should we move forward with this MOU of turf versus natural. And we'll hear more from DLA. They're going to do some investigations. There's always been certain concerns about what artificial means, risks with various artificial surfaces. They're going to do a deeper dive into creating a level of comfort with whatever we do propose.
Does this get into any of the dialogue we've been having about concerns of what's under the ground after our experiences on the other side of the property? Or is that later when we get further into the actual building component?
We
Or
did
construction
we
component.
did do the video survey of the sewers.
Oh, that's already been done.
That was
Okay.
that was already done. They found some things that are substandard or need to be fixed. There are places where the pipes aren't properly sloped out to the drain. Now, they're still functioning. They just might not be functioning as well as they should. With regards to things like old fuel tanks, that's pretty much you got to deal with it when you got to deal
Yeah,
with it.
we'll find it when we hit it with a
depends
shovel.
on documentation.
Yeah. Okay.
so any work here would come under water reclamation district as well. Would that be?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay.
Anytime you take grassy earth areas and do something else with them, the Water Reclamation District gets a say in what you do with the water that used to land there. And the rules have become much more stringent, which is why we now have to spend more money to store or treat or biotreat the water. Typically, we have to store some portion of it on site. We saw that with Ames, and actually just out here, the parking lot, there's a certain portion of the parking lot that's made out of pavers to allow the water to seep in and not end up in the sewer.
So part of the reason I was asking the question, and I don't know if it's the same reason you are or not, but under the reimbursables and additional services not included in this was the stormwater, the zoning, the soil boring, like all that. So this is just the drawings for what we want, and then we'll get more into the construction costs, which will then include this. But we already kind of know some of those issues or potential issues that can then go into the bidding process?
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
And
okay.
the stormwater is going to be a component of this.
Yeah.
It
Oh, okay,
guaranteed,
all right.
but it's just that you don't do this, you don't provide a plan or ask for a permit from the Water Reclamation District until you have drawings that are, you can build
Until you have
something
this.
off
Yeah,
of.
okay.
Yeah. So I'm sure that the Water Reclamation District has different rules of how they view artificial turf. There's things you can do underneath the turf to
Mhm.
allow water to infiltrate, and I actually forgot, the village also has a goal of reducing stormwater, so we would have to go before planning and zoning as well to get their sign off on exactly what we're proposing.
Okay, thanks.
All right. And then last is the district celebration ribbon cutting to acknowledge facility work for 2020 and 2021.
Actually,
All right.
yeah.
Did I, oh, I'm sorry, I missed something?
Stipends.
Extra duty assignments, my apologies. Skipped right over that.
And can I just interject on the MOUs to thank you and thanks to Steve Rice and DLA for being here. If there were questions, we did preview these in the Facility Advisory Committee. Joel, thank you for representing the intention of taking these next steps. And one thing we talked about was using the December 1st COW potentially as a special meeting to approve these if the board is comfortable kind of just setting that timeline, just because there are some pieces such as visioning work. And again, these are not summer of 22 projects. They'd be more likely 23 projects. But again, just continuing to move forward with a timeline and a process would be great.
Yeah, I'm perfectly comfortable with that, but I wanted to just say it's exciting to see these MOUs because these are conversations that we've been having that we can't really have any more conversation until there's more to go on. So I'm really excited to see these.
Mhm.
And just to note, Steve will be providing that more to go on information. I didn't want him to feel left out of this process.
I'm excited to see that we're exploring this.
To your point, I mean, that grassy area is, it's unusable, so.
Mhm.
And then that's gonna be the last campus that doesn't have like a legitimate outdoor area, so, yeah, it's very exciting to see it moving forward.
To your point, Wesley, the PE teachers have emphasized that is an unusable
Yeah, it's awful.
space the moment it starts raining. So that really is the primary goal of this.
And for a landlocked
Mhm.
district, to have a large piece of unusable space seems like we need to do something about
Yeah.
it. Yeah. So I'm excited.
Next.
I wanted to give you a quick presentation. There's a lot of information in the board book about extra duty stipends.
And I could just sort of set that one up too, like sort of why we're talking about this. If you recall, I think it was pre-pandemic, we had talked about the fact that we have very specific language in our contract, which Jim is going to share here, around where a committee with the teachers and administrators make proposals about preferred activities for children that might be then later for board approval. And the last time I think we brought these for board approval pre-pandemic, I think you all asked a really important philosophical question of, are we approving these because there's room in the budget and it's about money, or is it really about value to children? It's really about both. But I think just again, kind of taking that deeper dive, giving you more context to really think about sort of the process and the kinds of activities that are currently approved. So Jim this has been sort of one of these things sort of on the back burner for a while, and wanted to bring it forward for the board.
So this is all spelled out in the agreement we have with REC. Also in the agreement is the annual increases are built in, and the definition of the stipend committee. There's quite a few of them in the contract, so these are the higher level categories that they all fall into. And I put just a sample of what might fall in each category. Now, in last year, we spent $85,000 out of the $212,000 that was budgeted, but that was a really unusual year, and a lot of the extra duties didn't take place. One thing we started doing last year, though, and it was a good year for that while we didn't have so many going on, we asked the sponsors to track how many meetings they have or how many sessions they have and the average number of students they would have, so that those are the kind of questions we ask when the board's looking to approve it. So I was hoping to gather some data. And data from last year isn't extremely useful, but at least we got the process in place now. So in the current year, we have $200,000 in the budget. And it's based, again, on the list that's in the contract and the new dollar amount, which was a 1.5% increase over the previous year. And with one of this sheet that's in your board book has the list of them, and then I added a column to give you an idea how many students participated in each one. So there aren't that many, but hopefully for next year when we're doing this, there'll be a lot more data there for you to see.
COVID that we didn't have those kids participate, and so there we didn't pay that out.
Yeah, some activities just didn't happen last
Okay.
year because we didn't feel that we could safely do them during COVID. Either adults felt that way or the kids, or some combination. So that's why that just far less was spent overall. There's many fewer activities happening after school.
Two that aren't up here but are in the report you have, like the wind ensemble had 52 students, and the book and library club had 4. So there's a wide range depending on what kind of club it is.
So I have another, and you might be getting to this. I just have another question, and it's just how did the numbers come? How did they come up with the numbers of what the stipend should be for the activities? Because there seems to be some significant discrepancies between some of them, and so just sort of wondering.
How are the dollar amounts?
Yeah, how do you decide how much the basketball coach is paid compared to the person that runs garden club? You know?
I'm not sure how they were originally set, but what I inherited, we increased by whatever is negotiated. I think that originally they had to be set based on how much time and effort would be involved in it.
Yeah, so my understanding is there was a study done, I know it was before I was superintendent here, where teachers who were running some of these clubs and activities were asked to track the actual number of hours they spend. So something like the sports coaching, for example, is set up in a different way than the after-school club, where you can really define the amount of time. It's I'm sure based on sort of an average hourly times the number of hours that is typical for the activity, and then it does get reviewed through the contract negotiation process. There's a few we've changed, like I think we changed the Special Olympics coach at one point, sort of acknowledging that they were probably spending as much time or similar amount of time to some other sports. I believe we changed the mentoring just to kind of modify, made it as timesheet verified, that there was a huge range of how people were spending their time, and so it was just easier to say, then let us know the specific time that you're spending outside of your contractual day doing those activities. So there is a method behind all of it, but it's a method then that kind of gets, overlaid year to year. So the analysis of it, I mean, we have wondered if we should sort of stop and do that reanalysis. I think it's a somewhat tedious process, but if that was something that the board felt was important in understanding value, we could look at.
One thing we implemented this year is that an employee who's going to be a sponsor on one of these clubs can go in through their employee portal in Infinite Visions and see the list of what's been assigned to them and when it'll be paid. And they verify this, or they send it back and ask a question. So it kind of gets everybody working with the same expectations at the beginning of the year. And then this year we're going to change that tracking sheet where they keep track of the average number of students. I'll just have them summarize it so that it's easy to transfer to the other sheet. We're going to have still the number of sessions and the average number of students. And then we just added a box where they can give us some of the highlights on what was done during that session or during that activity. And then we put it on Google Sheets so it'll be easier for everyone to access it and then when we want to pull it all together. A question came up on how are there any fees associated with these clubs or sports? And only with athletics. There's a $35 fee that you saw on the other sheet earlier. And last year, which was an odd year, we collected $2,880, $35 at a time. And there we go. Any more questions?
Just a quick question in that, with last year, we spent so little. We're not totally back up to budget this year. I think it was 225 or something was budgeted previous year, and then we budgeted 200 this year. I mean, so given where we're at now, we're expecting to pay all that out. We're expecting that those activities will go.
I don't think we'll spend the whole 200,000 if that's what you're asking.
You said yes? Yeah.
I think we'll come in
Okay.
favorable to that financially.
That's good to hear.
Pre-COVID, did we hit whatever was budgeted for? Like, did we typically hit it, or were we always under by a little bit?
I'd say we're always around 80%.
Oh,
So last year I added every one of them up and came up with a 212,000, and then we come in under it. I'll just put a nice round number so it doesn't imply any exactness that isn't really there.
And I suppose there's always this chance that sometimes a principal will say, I really could use some extra supervision out on the playgrounds, or at lunchtime, so that number could, we have some discretion to make those approvals, but that's more falls under less the clubs and activities and more about that before and after school and lunch supervision fees.
I think this is a helpful start. I think it'll be interesting. It's hard last year because most of your numbers were blank because we didn't do them. So it'll be interesting to see this year with it being kind of back to what it was before. I think that's what I'm most interested in is just what is our participation level to just better inform kind of to Dave's point. It's like you're looking at some of these where there's 37 students and others where there's 6 and some of them are about the same, or you just look at that per pupil, per whatever child cost, and does that make sense? And so I think again, I don't think any of us were here saying like we should cut these down because this school has more than the other. I think it was more of just a general understanding. So this is a great foundational start, and hopefully as we can get more tracking going on and just better understand the total participation, that'll be helpful for future conversations.
I guess I would like, I know it's a tedious process, Martha, and it sounds like it hasn't been done in a while, but I would like to have an idea of how much time is spent in some of these. I don't know how the rest of the board would feel about it, but I'm just looking at some of the stipend amounts. There is like some pretty significant discrepancies, and I'm not saying like one is, I'm not saying it's not fair or accurate. I just would sort of like to have a better idea, especially considering that we haven't done it in a while. Maybe set something, depending on what the board thinks. Just to start tracking. How much time does a sponsor spend on something versus a chaperone? What's really the difference? I don't understand the difference between the two.
I think if we were to do like a time study process, which is really what they did, I'd probably want to talk to the REC, and then I think we would set it up to happen over the course of next year, because some of these things have already happened,
Right.
or some things still aren't happening because of COVID. It's certainly, if there's sort of value in that, and I agree some of these lists get, well, they've gone up by the agreed upon increase, and taking another look at that is certainly something we could do. I know the other question, to kind of add on just another layer, is the balance between schools. I think that was another question that you all had asked, that there's no requirement that a school must have, and there's been no requirement that a school shouldn't have programming. So these really, the co-curriculars in particular, really are kind of a passion project, something that a teacher's very interested in doing, a teacher who has the time to get paid for after-school activities. So I think that's another question that, again, some additional board feedback, again, to inform that committee process and even then the board approval process that was one of the areas I think we got stopped and had questions about last time when we talked about it as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I was going to ask, so there is, right to that, there is room. So say if there's a teacher at Blythe that is like, I'm very interested in this, I would like to add this co-curricular, we are
Right.
able to do that. I mean, I certainly don't want to say like, oh, let's remove these from Hollywood to make it, like, I don't like that at all, but
Yeah.
there is room for people to create programming in the budget if we want to.
right, and that's really gets to that whole end of school year process that's outlined in the contract where the
Right.
REC meets with the administration, teachers write a proposal, so I want to do a new or different club, and then it gets reviewed, and then it comes to the
Okay.
board for final approval. So and I guess the board, we would be advising you that there were so many requests this year that actually if we approved them all, they would go beyond our budgeted amount. That hasn't happened. More what I've heard is there's not the balance between schools, and it is very much, if somebody's interested in doing it, I think the board has been very supportive, the administration's been very supportive, going back to kind of that purpose idea that these are engaging activities for children, that, for some children, this is what makes them love school the most, is what they get to do after school. So, I always appreciate when and where we have teachers who are willing, able to do this. I also appreciate where teachers have other commitments beyond their own school day, whether it's young families of their own or whatever, and don't have the time. So it's kind of a unique balance. Jim also pointed out, other than the athletics, all the co-curriculars, the clubs and activities are free for our children. So I think that's a really nice opportunity that our children have, that the schools are providing, and again, probably somewhat different than maybe what other schools are doing. Other school districts, I should say. So a couple layers underneath all this in terms of the board's analysis or review. So it sounds like there'd be board interest, even if it takes us maybe into next school year to do a time study?
Well, I mean, the reason for my ask is just to sort of make sure that everything is equitable. And it's like, it's not that I want to get rid of one or the other, it's just to make sure that we are paying, like, the stipends are equitable across the board, regardless if you're a coach, a chaperone, a sponsor, et cetera. Just want to make sure it's accurate. I mean, equitable, I should say.
Like in terms of time spent.
Exactly.
So if somebody's
if
spending
we're paying-
1 hour a week versus a coach who's spending 12 hours a week, like making sure that everything is being paid appropriately. Yeah, I mean, I can support that. I'm in no rush for that, especially since this isn't.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm
in
not
the
saying we do it
contract.
this year,
Yeah.
or, I mean, I realize it.
Yeah, put COVID aside. Let's just do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. I'm in no rush to try to fix it. I mean, it's a relatively minor portion of our overall budget, and I think it's just something that has been lingering for a while. So if it takes us a while, it's not a pressing issue, but I think just whatever we can do to just better understand it. And I agree. Like, if we're going to pay X dollars an hour, does that actually translate across the board and participation rates and stuff
And
like
it
that?
seems like, Jim, you said you're collecting information, like from those sheets, informations on what they're actual spending time on? Is that, you had mentioned that in the presentation? So I'm assuming that could lend towards an analysis of.
That would give you an indication. It wouldn't be
Yeah.
tracking the exact.
Right.
All right.
So yeah, I think to your question, Martha, I think if it takes us through a full school year to get that accurate assessment or general assessment, it sounds like we're all kind of on the same page with that. We're not trying to get it done tomorrow.
Yep.
Definitely makes sense, although I guess there's another aspect And that's, I'm sure, part of the same report is a number of participants. Does that work into the rate of pay as well? Obviously, if you're coaching 20 kids, that's a lot more activity than if you're running an activity for 4 or 5.
Right, no, I mean, that would, I mean, if we're looking at like, if there's like, we're looking at one coach, like say, I mean, I'm just making these numbers up obviously, but if we like basketball, there's like 100 kids, and soccer, there's only 50, I mean, should we be paying the same rate? I mean, that's a fair question, but I mean, without knowing how much time is spent, I mean.
Yeah. I don't necessarily think that scenario would change the stipend level, but I know what you're getting at, yeah. Although I think that, we have to keep in mind too, like the idea of the co-curriculars and all these activities are keep kids engaged at school, which helps them become, there's proof that when you're connected to your community, you do better. And, so whether there's a class that's only 6 kids versus 50, like, it's still important for those 6 kids, so I don't want to,
I'm not saying we eliminate it for any reason. I'm not saying that at all.
Okay, I just want to make sure we weren't saying we should only do the ones that
right,
were.
Right. I'm not saying that we should eliminate. I mean, I completely agree with that.
Yeah. I think we're all in agreement here, so.
I think so.
I think we need more, once we have the information, we can have a better conversation around what it means and what we want to do with it, yeah. If it takes us a year to get it, we're okay with that.
Yeah.
Okay,
Definitely.
thank you.
All right, and that takes us to the district celebration ribbon cutting to acknowledge facility work in 2020-2021.
2 years later.
And this is a question that had come up, I believe, in our facility advisory committee, that I think we were thinking about Hollywood being almost finished, and we had planned ribbon cuttings, I believe, October of 2020 here at Ames to represent the work that had been done at the schools in the summer of 2020. It's now a year plus later. COVID is still here. On the other hand, there's sort of much to celebrate, much to acknowledge in the important facilities work at all 4 of the elementaries. There have been significant changes. I don't want to lose track of an opportunity to sort of acknowledge the board's work, acknowledge the community's work, community participation, whether it's been taxpayer dollars or neighbors who put up with construction and changes and all of that. I think it's important. I think, Joel, you and I talked about maybe we could do it in December, get a day like today, and you're like, yeah, no, that's probably a bad idea. But I think it was a nice fall day when we had the idea. So anyway, just curious.
It was nicer this morning.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was nice this morning.
Yes.
Maybe could we tie it to like a year-end school ending type celebration
Like
as
spring?
well?
I mean,
or like a May or something like that, like toward the end of the year.
Yeah, and I just didn't know how important it felt to all of you, and I've shared with Hollywood that although they'll definitely get to play on the playground and use the multipurpose room as soon as it is ready to go, that we'll want to really acknowledge the district-wide work through some kind of formal presentation. Kathy bought that really big scissors a year ago, and we haven't used. Yeah. So we're waiting, but spring maybe does make more sense unless people are very eager for a winter ribbon cutting.
I think, given the environment we're still in and still dealing with these days, I think number one, definitely people are looking towards something that would be outdoors. December, potentially outdoors might be problematic. Spring could be problematic too with outdoors, depending on the rain. But it seems like spring might be a better time where people might be a little bit more freer, and hopefully the weather is a little bit nicer, and just might be a better time.
Weather and
Personally.
COVID, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say.
That's my hope.
Hopefully.
I was just going to say, wouldn't it be nice if we can say COVID will be better then too? And
I'll take a rainy day and over COVID any day.
No COVID, rain, we'll take it, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Now, there definitely should be cake, though. That's something I want to stress.
Yeah, well, I know districts that brought like the ice cream truck in or something as a way to thank the community. So, we have ideas. We just need the right timing. So.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we should definitely do it.
Yeah, I think we should do. I do think we should do it. I sort of, as much as I'd like to do it like next month, I think it might be a little mean, there's so many factors going on right now. If everyone's okay waiting until like the spring, I'd more favor this spring type ribbon cutting.
Yeah.
We will look at our spring calendars and be hopeful.
We've already waited
Yeah.
this long, so.
Yeah. Thank you.
Right. That brings us back around again to public comment. Has there been any public comment come in?
There has not.
All right. So then future meeting dates, December 1st, 2021, special meeting and committee of the whole at 7 p.m., multipurpose room at Ames Elementary. December 15th, 2021, regular business meeting, 7 p.m. in the multipurpose room at Ames Elementary. Board will enter into closed session at 6:15 p.m. if necessary, and return to open session at 7 p.m. Let's see, next we're talking about January 5th would likely be canceled. January 19th, regular business meeting, 7 p.m. in the multipurpose room at Ames Elementary School. This board will enter into closed session at 6:15 p.m. if necessary, and return to open session at 7 p.m. And if there is nothing else, this meeting is adjourned.